This is Big Man Tyrone, and you're about to watch the MtG Cabal cast with your hosts, Woad, Thirsty, and Reptar. Sub to us on all your podcast networks at MtG Cabal Cast and YouTube.
All right, guys, welcome to the newest episode of the Cabal Cast. This week, we're going to expand a little bit upon what we talked about last week when we were touching on print runs, COVID effects on sealed, etc., etc. We're actually going to take a deep dive at supplementals, including secret layers, which were something we kind of wanted to avoid just to see how the market settled out long term, what production issues, if any, arose, which we touched a little bit on last episode. We're going to go into again today. So let's get our supplemental palooza underway.
Yeah, why not? So there's a lot that goes on with the supplemental set in regards to the Magic ecosystem, and not just the card economy, but also playability and effects on print run, as we see now and previously, whereby certain things can overstep and just force out something from print run and delay. And it creates this kind of interesting, like, churn effect and an interesting amount of speculative room to operate in when it comes to supplemental sets like a master set, supplemental products like a commander product or a secret layer, and then some things like the convention sets. So those being San Diego Comic-Cons, the HasCon, that was the name of the convention set, right? And like the My Little Pony stuff, right? So there's a lot that falls under the supplemental balloon, and it all impacts pretty interestingly, pretty uniquely, and opens up these opportunities, like I mentioned. Then the most common one and the easiest one to look at are things like master sets, full supplemental sets, be it an actual Modern Masters or Masters 25, or like we just saw a remastered set for the first time in paper. These all have impacts on print runs of other things that are currently going on, and also impact the game financially. And each one is different from the next, which is kind of interesting overall. You look at something like Jumpstart, which they printed. There was a print issue. They had to reprint, and eventually we got a second wave. But because of the issue with the print run overall, now it's interjecting with a standard set, and the timeline for Jumpstart is completely thrown off, right? We've covered this a lot. So the finances around Jumpstart are completely different than something like Time Spiral Remasters, which just looks to be underprinted on the whole in comparison to other master sets. So there's a unique opportunity for what you want to do with this stuff. Do you want to hold it in sealed, or do you want to hold singles? And to me, when it comes to supplementals, on the whole, I'm actually for supplementals. I like when they do something like this because it offers everybody that plays the game or collects the game a product that might speak to them on a different level than something else would. So I've never really been into buying standard sets to crack packs or masters packs just to crack packs. I'd rather draft master sets. And when it comes to standard, I just like having a box or two so I can play standard. I don't have to go out and buy a bunch of unique singles, and it gives me some fodder to trade with, because to me that's also a big aspect of the playability of the game on a local level. Yeah, I could go out and buy all the singles I want, but my ability to interact with players is a lot more narrow when I don't have a binder for them to take a look at after a round, because I still get asked that question a lot. Hey, do you have anything for trade? So buying those standard boxes offers me a different avenue to work within the game and the social sphere. But when it comes to supplementals on the whole, just broad categorization, how do you feel about them?
So I love supplementals. I think even products like Double Masters, which I love Mero's quote, maybe this product just isn't for you. I think products like that are great because it is one of the few products that, like you said, it offers something for your high-end collectors, your players. It satisfies every level of the Magic econosphere.
Your dumpster divers.
Yeah, everyone can get what they want. And you know what? Pauper players love stuff like this because of the rarity shift. So not only do you get, constructed format people, you even your modern, legacy, rest in peace, vintage, whatever, you also get your pauper players. And I think it's interesting that that's one of the few times that those people get to feel like WotC sees them on these supplementals. And I think that barring production issues, they generally have a very predictable financial path in terms of like price cratering and then retracting back up. So it's something that if you're a little bit more savvy, you don't even have to be like an aficionado of MTG Finance. You can just be the average MTG Finance guy and be like, you know what, these Thought Seizes and Iconic Masters for $13 are way too cheap.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm going to pick some up because it should be more money. And I think that is an extra avenue that supplementals give that standard products don't, because you don't have to read the meta with supplemental products the way you do with standard a lot of times. Mm-hmm. You can tell immediately this card is good. This has an established track record. You know, this Tarmogoyf has seen play for eons. You know, as soon as 6 months after Future Sight came out and it stopped being a bulk rare, that card's never not seen play. And I think that that's really good, and it touches on, like you said, the social sphere of it, because it does give you the draft environment, it gives you the constructed environment, and it gives you the trade avenue as well, because these are cards that, don't get me wrong, the new standard sets trade well, but the new supplemental sets, when they come out, trade incredibly well. Everyone has them in their binders because they know everybody wants them, and they're more than willing to offload whatever they have that they don't need for something they do need. Mm-hmm. So you can get the opportunity where you have the guy that's like, I have, you know, this Old Border Chalice of the Void, and I've got 10 EDH decks that I need a Coalition Relic in. Great. I will trade you, you know, 8 Coalition Relics for that Chalice of the Void, and you both leave happy.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can get stuff like that. And I think that it is probably the most necessary set type for Magic's continued existence. Mm-hmm. Because it's the main avenue for high dollar reprint equity.
Yes.
And I think that, you know, the reserve list is the reserve list, and everyone hems and haws about how awful it is, how the game's too expensive. These supplemental sets keep that price down.
Yes. Yeah.
But the way they've been doing them lately, they have enough chase cards to satisfy your high end. You have your foil Old Border True Names, Old Border Foil Ponders, any of the Old Border cards really are just good chase, and there's plenty of low-hanging fruit there as well, which I'll touch on later. But I think they're great.
Yeah, and the only thing for me that really makes or breaks a supplemental isn't the fact that it's supplemental, that it does interject on printing timelines. It can suffer its from its own set of issues. There's really just whether or not a supplemental is subjectively good or objectively good. And I think that's a lot of what people are kind of looking at in regards to both the secret layers and the master sets, is some are subjectively good and some are objectively good, and thus that shifts the market on each one of those products, and it's something you have to be very aware of when you're going to be moving into some of these sets. You know, buying into Ultimate Masters or Time Spiral remasters, day of, basically, as soon as you could, get your boxes on the cheap for immediate flips, because those sets are objectively good. That is, you know, great. But then you look at something like Masters 2.5, and you weren't able to do that because that set was objectively good. It was not. It was objectively good. It was not subjectively good, because there was not a lot of hits overall in that set. It was meant to kind of relive the history of Magic. And similarly, From the Vault 20 was objectively good. But that set, much like A25 and a number of others that are subjective, are 99% air and 1% Jace the Mind Sculptor. Yeah. And that is kind of where, to me, the division of supplementals really lies. And so when you want to look at them as finance vehicles, something to either flip or to sit on, you really need to take into consideration, okay, is this objective or subjective? There are things that blur the lines, like the Seb secret layer. You know, that appeals to somebody who likes Seb art, but a lot of people like Seb art, right? So while art is objective, that is kind of a subjectively good secret layer because of how easy it would be to turn that stuff around. Similarly, the Godzilla lands.
Yeah. I think another... sorry, go ahead.
There are people out there that like the Toho stuff. No, that's fine.
Yeah.
And there's just not as many of them that like Toho compared to Seb.
Well, I think it's like looking at the Walking Dead secret layer versus the Fetchland secret layer, right? Yep. Everyone was in an uproar when Walking Dead came out. They're like, these cards are too good. Well, that secret layer ended up being subjectively good because it has a couple cards that see play in humans, and the rest is whatever. Mm-hmm. Whereas the Fetchlands are obviously just objectively insane.
Yeah.
Fetchlands are never bad. ever. And if you can get limited run fetch lands, and this has been proven time and again, be it set foils, expeditions, whatever, it's obviously just better. No matter what, that's good.
Yeah.
That is just always a good box set to have. And I think you're touching on a really good point here that, with the master set, sometimes just due to the theme of the set, it may just be subjectively good out of the gate. Like you said, A25 was honestly one of the most fun draft environments I've ever played.
Yeah.
The set by no means was, absolutely nutter butter financial vehicle, but it was really fun.
Yeah, I'll give another really good example of objective versus subjective from the vaults, right? I mentioned from the vault 20, okay? Subjectively, from the vault's dragons, good, because it was the first one.
Yeah.
It set the trend for what this product would be, but the overall list of cards in this from the vault are objectively bad, except for
It's so bad.
except for Kokosho.
Yeah.
And that's just EDH playability. If they kept reprinting Kokosho in modern sets, then the only reason from the vault would even be in the conversation of a good product at all is because it was the first. It set the precedent for this product. So it's kind of lent this subjectivity. On the other hand, objectively good from the vaults, Exiled and Relics.
Oh god, Relics
Those are
is so
incredibly powerful. Exiled has Berserk, it has Channel, Gifts Ungiven, Lotus Petal, Mystical Tutor, Necro, Divining Top, Skull Clamp, Strip Mine, Tinker, Trinisphere. These are all incredibly good, incredibly powerful cards that defined formats, and like the From the Vault says, were banned at one point in time. Now, a banned card doesn't mean it's great, because Curd Ape is in here. That's a good creature, overpowered then, not great now. But this is not the 99-1 that I mentioned before, Heir to Jace the Mind Sculptor. This is a really good set. Relics has more reserveless cards on it. Karn Silver Golem, Mox Diamond, Memory Jar are in here. You have the first Sol Ring foil.
Yeah.
They put in this set before Mirrodin Besiege block was even it was announced but not previewed. A card from the upcoming block in Sword of Body and Mind. You could acquire a card from an upcoming set before it was printed in From the Vault Relics. Aether Vials in here, Isochron Scepter. Objectively good cards. This is objectively a good From the Vault.
Yeah. And I think that finding that line of this is objective versus subjectively good it's important. And I will say that just because something is subjectively good doesn't mean it is less good than, From the Vault Relics. Because based on your local market, if that's what you're catering to, well, I mean, I need more World Gorger dragons because that's what they want. Or I need more of the From the Vault Thunder Dragon, that art was questionable. That was silly.
So bad.
But I think that that's something that, when you're looking at these products is important for your evaluation of it.
Yes.
Whereas, you touched on, and we were talking about this before we started recording, Time Spiral Remastered really is a one-card booster pack with 14 bonus slots is what it's shaping up to be. And are you comfortable playing that one-card lottery is what it comes down to.
Yeah. And so this product in and of itself creates that conversation, or should necessitate that conversation of, if I'm going to buy it, what is my goal here? Am I going to try and flip immediately to try and recoup, like flip everything from the set and the old borders, or am I going to sit on it and ride that train and pull my ripcord in a couple of weeks when everybody's out of stock and I can churn these sealed products? That's part of every conversation you need to have with yourself when you're looking at specs, is what is my expected outcome here? How long am I going to sit on this? Where is my churn? What is my future for this product as a whole? And between the glut of secret layers that we've had in Time Spiral Remastered, these conversations are quite important, especially when a lot of this comes down to recently subjectivity. I think another good example, and it kind of leans on this fact where it really is like pseudo art dependent, is the Party Hard, Rock Harder, or whatever the metal art secret layer is.
Yeah.
Yep. WotC claims they picked quote-unquote metal art. Well, you know what? They picked a subgenre of metal that caters to that art style to use for those cards and color schemes. It doesn't even apply to the majority of the metal genre. Anything that you can label as metal, that art style is extremely narrow. And it is entirely subjective about whether or not people are going to want to play those cards at all or even see them. But then you look at Secret Lair Black History Month, and all those cards are bangers.
Yeah.
Every one of them. They are just objectively good.
I think it's also worth noting that, especially in some of the recent supplemental products, like Modern Horizons, for example, when they have a mixture of new cards and reprints, which, again, is kind of a new thing with Modern Horizons, it's a little bit of both. And those are the types of things that require a little bit more format knowledge of like what's actively happening in them, as opposed to like a Time Spiral Remastered, where you can just have historical context.
Yeah.
And that'll put those cards into it, or just know that like, rare foil go burr. Like, obviously that works.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be interesting to see Modern Horizons 2, because we have Modern Horizons 1 as an example. We know that, that set was one of the most poorly designed in terms of fair and not broken sets that's ever been printed, Hogak. So it'll be interesting to see, as more of these supplemental sets come out, what's going to happen with them, because we had the From the Vault, or the Secret Lair, where they said, hey, by the way, Uro's in this, but we're banning it.
Yeah.
And I'm actually interested to see how that type of design is going to affect the value of supplemental products, because Secret Lairs, by and large, from what we've seen, are a fine hold.
Yeah.
You can hold them for a few months and sell them for a 2x at least. What's going to happen when, the absolute banger in the Secret Lair is banned before the product gets to your hands? What's going to happen with Modern Horizons 2 based on how Modern Horizons 1 was?
Yeah.
I assume we're still going to see the insane rush at the beginning, but that, 3 to 6 month refractory period afterwards, what's that going to look like now?
Yeah.
Now that we know to keep an eye out for these cards.
I actually have a note specifically at Modern Horizons 1 in comparison to something like Masters 25, which I'm going to continue to harp on, and you'll hear why in a moment. So Modern Horizons, to me, represented strong cards in a strong limited product, meaning both limited in print run and limited in playstyle, right? They wanted to blow the doors off this set the first time they did it, and they just incinerated the doors. That product was nuts. And yes, they had to ban cards out of it, but it's because they incinerated those doors. They pushed way too hard with that product for the first time, and you got cards like Hogak and Astrolabe and Urza out of it. But in all honesty, if those cards weren't that strong, you would wind up with Masters 25, which was janky cards in a janky draft environment. And you didn't really want to have that with a supplement that's supposed to go direct into, at the time, one of the most popular formats. So to me, that represents the good part of supplementals and a set that I would like to have owned and sealed versus one that I would not like to have owned and sealed.
I'll agree with that.
Modern Horizons 1 versus 825. When it comes to Horizons 2, I expect it to be more of Modern Horizons 1, but maybe toned down a little bit, because obviously they made mistakes, right? They got to learn from it. We know we're getting the fetch lands somewhere, either in the rare slot, maybe the mythic slot, and there does exist the opportunity for the set to fall flat from a limited environment, but still stand tall from a strong cards in a strong set. I don't think we're going to get janky cards in a janky set.
My biggest fear with Modern Horizons 2 is they're going to do the knee-jerk Amonkhet reaction. I don't think they're going to, but I don't trust Wizards of the Coast not to fuck this up. So...
I understand that, and only spoilers will tell, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, I just had a note about MH1, and my expectations for MH2 are going to be the same based on what I saw, which was this was a good supplemental set all around, for playability, for the hold, and for as sealed and singles, as opposed to something like A25 or is it Modern Masters 2, which had Karn and Tarmogoyf and some other odds and ends, but it's not 3 with the fetch lands. So it's like you got to balance your stuff and try and figure out where your janky environments are and aren't going to be. Similarly, I kind of put Time Spiral Remastered alongside A25 because the other cards in that pack, they're not janky, but they craft a very specific draft environment, and outside of that, there are some great playables, but it's just going to be a hold for that one card. So to me, it kind of represents a bad supplemental set. You're effectively just playing the lottery on the entire worth of that box. And to me, I don't like that. The secret layers that I bought were the objectively, in my mind, the objectively good ones. Kaleidoscope Killers. I think I have the Ooze ones, one or two of the Oozes, and a Bob Ross one. That one is personal. I want Bob Ross.
Oh,
right.
Yeah. Bob Ross is great.
Yeah, I don't own many other. I'm getting the BHM ones as well, because to me those entire sets, without the stained glass Walker, or in the case of the Bob Ross one, the stained glass, the alt art Evolving Wilds, represent good holds. It's not the library, the lottery ticket inside. It's the other cards in the secret layers that make it worthwhile to me. Similarly, the master sets that I have a little bit of stock on, they represent strong cards in a strong environment that help prop up existing and growing formats. They're not janky cards from a janky environment that prop up a format with, what is it? What is an A25? It's Crypt and Mono Drain.
Jace.
Yeah, sure. That's it. And moving forward, when it comes to these supplementals, I'm still going to cast, the same discerning eye at them. Is this set worthwhile for me to own an entire box of? Are the majority of the cards in the pack going to be worth something now or later? If I flip now, or I hold, or I crack for singles because I want to play stuff, etc. Where is the value of this going to lie? But none of that really changes the fact that I do believe that supplementals on the whole are great for the game. One of the things we haven't touched on are the commander decks. And those, when it comes to power level and their impact, definitely ebb and flow. Sometimes WotC commits...
Prince Partners.
I was going to say an oopsie in True Name Nemesis, but that was me. People targeted the Grixis deck circa 2015, I think, for True Name Nemesis, because it was a legacy power level card. And, that deck, moved out of stock immediately. Rest of the deck was great because it had Baleful Strix and Toxic Deluge, which are highly playable in Commander. And for the most part, these decks, generally speaking, prop up the format. They change the format almost every time because they give you something new and unique and interesting to do with the format and the cards contained within. Sometimes it's just necessary reprints and the rest of the deck kind of falls flat looking at you, Fraelis. But it's still a great way to bring people in or help infuse cards into a collection that are powerful, representative of a format, and to the best of my knowledge, really just represent a great element of the game. WotC's giving people something that play Commander to look at every year, to look forward to expect, to get excited about. It's not just, I've got to crack packs or buy singles to get a handful of cards. It's, I can buy a brand new deck that I like, that fits what I'm going to do. And I can either adjust it, play it as is, or maybe just break it apart and put some of the various cards into other decks I own. And it is a product for me.
And it's interesting because it kind of occupies, once upon a time, people were looking at pre-coms in this way, which for those of you that don't know, JIT was basically a commander deck at the time. And
Avatar
as
was
product...
another big one.
Whoa. At this point, we've kind of evolved past the point where it's one card in the deck, since it's designed for a specific format rather than built out of cards of a set. But I think that, commander decks are also, they occupy an interesting spot because even the ones that are bad for me I want to hold this.
Yeah.
Because it's something that you can have as a trade that you can just, it's ready to play. You're a new player. I'm going to help you out and throw this at you for a discount. And I think that they're very much, for me, even the misses are something I want to hold sealed.
Oh, absolutely.
Specifically, even the misses only with the commander decks. Because it is something that, like you said, it's ready-made. you can take it and go right away. And there's one of my play groups that I'm in that we, every now and then we have these precons still assembled, and we'll
Oh
just
yeah,
by the end of the night, we may not be able to see straight, but we're going to sit there and play with these precon commander decks and have a time doing it.
yeah.
And I think that, those occupy a very unique spot in that supplemental product because of the ready-made playability.
Yes.
And that's the type of thing that I think is just generally good to have. So
I think the commander sets are emblematic of what I want supplementals to be, which is highly accessible, easy to understand, immediately impactful product. You don't have to dig for the meaning behind it. You don't have to dig to try and get your hands on it. You don't have to dig to try and make it work in your collection or your financial forecasting. Everything you need is just right there in front of you. And from the second commander deck printing onward, I have bought a case, which is just one of each, and set it aside. It's the only supplemental product I have bought every single one of, including the Brawl decks, to just set aside for later because of how important and how they just always represent, how important they are to the game, and what they represent financially, which is just consistent gainers. The only thing I might eat my hat on is the fact that I have a bajillion of the Grixis deck with True Name Nemesis. But again, like I said, that deck is also kind of buoyed by the fact that it has Toxic Deluge and Baleful Strix in it. And until they put Baleful Strix in Modern Horizons 2 and let us play that card in Modern, I'm not going to lose my ass on it. But, I was paying Walmart MSRP for them, so I'm not out too much.
Yeah. And I think that, it's interesting because I'm kind of getting to the point where Secret Lairs occupy that for me too. Where even the, this is a dud. This is not good. This is not a great Secret Lair. It's not going to be great. They're still proving to be a good mid to long-term investment with your 6-month plus turnaround. So, they take up a little bit less space too, which is also definitely a plus. Because, you can buy a Secret Lair for $30 and get 10 of those for the, 300, and that takes up the same amount of space as 3 boxes of whatever standard product that probably isn't going to be worth anything, depending on what's in it. And I think that that's something that very much for me, I'm like, you know what, this is great. I'll take it.
Yeah.
I'll sit on 10 of these and be fine with it. It doesn't matter to me. And I think that that's the type of thing that is very much going in Secret Lair's favor. And I'm hoping that that shapes up to be the new norm for supplemental products. Because we haven't had, to my recollection, a true long-term dud in supplemental products for a while now. Can you remember one?
When you discount Masters sets, okay, so this is kind of interesting because recently we've had the Super Spike in From the Vaults. But I can point to From the Vault Angels, From the Vault Realms, From the Vault Destruction as duds.
Yeah.
But they were only rescued recently by Alpha Investments' charge at them. He mentioned them as an investment vehicle or whatever, so his viewers went after them. Then a number of other people in the MTG finance sphere followed suit, and so they got rescued.
Yeah.
Rescued by that. But aside from those and a handful of awkward master sets, no, I can't really point to anything else that was a dud financially. I'm glad you talked about the Secret Lairs because when I look at some things like Box of Rocks, to me that's just a miss overall. Because one, I appreciate the Charlie Brown joke.
Yeah.
I do, but to me that was just a swing and a miss on a product overall. From name to targets. I understand why they did it. I get it, and I understand that it was financially viable. But in my mind, it was just so low effort that I really thought it was just going to be a miss overall. But even I don't even think that stuff has been a dud. Maybe Secret Lair Red, the Boom, Kaboom, whatever that one was with a bunch of goblins in it, because Some of them were legacy playable. Some of them just aren't playable. I was looking through secret layers before we started talking, but that's about it. Like, in all honesty, there haven't been a whole lot of misses compared to the number of successes. They are definitely batting over 500 in regards to secret layer success, and for the most part, supplemental success overall in the grand scheme of things. And you can't bat 1,000. You just can't. It's never going to happen. So you can't sit there and try and find fault with supplemental products as a whole when there are a handful of duds, especially when it comes to things like the master sets, where they also have to create a draft environment around them. Some of them are meant to be anniversary things. Some of them are meant to be like cube editions. So there are going to be these janky sets overall.
Yeah.
And so again, and to your point, yeah, I can find a few duds, but that is a non-majority number of duds.
Yeah. And I think it's also the type of thing that even with, especially on secret layers, because it is a relatively new product, I am comfortable actually grabbing even the dud ones and sitting on them for a little bit just to see how it develops. Because at this point, even the crappy from the vaults, your dragons, your angels, all that stuff, sealed, are still worth a mint over what retail was on those things.
Yep. I own... From the Vault was actually the first supplemental I started buying every single one of, and I had a handful of opportunities to buy dragons, but I never bought it because I thought, why would I? All these cards are absolute trash, but I never really paid mind to the fact that it paved the way. For a very long time, I didn't. I never thought of it like that. And then as it slowly started to creep up towards $100, I was like, why? And then I realized it's because it's the first one. It set the precedent. I believe even down to the presentation of that secret layer, everything about it is different. It's just like the first dual decks. They're not great, but because the presentation of those first dual decks are so different than the rest of them, they hold a little bit more of a premium, especially the early ones, not just because of the content, but because of what they represent. Compared to the commander decks, which are just great overall. And yeah, sure, the first ones back in like 2012 or whatever, for the most part, are worth more because they're the first, but other than that, they're just still bangers like the rest of them. So you don't get got by buying any of them over time.
And I think that's, I hope that's the way that we start to see things go with supplemental sets. Mm-hmm. We'll see how it goes next time we get a master set. If we get another master set, they're discontinued. We're never doing them again. We're not doing masterpieces, and we're not doing mythic editions either. But lo and behold, we've been doing them. They just call them something else.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, if they want to keep making remastered sets for paper like they did for Moto just to get more cards into the hands of players, I'm all for it. And whatever gimmick they want to do for it, again, go for it. Because it'll do the same thing that Time Spiral Remaster did, which is that the cards in the core set are going to be extremely accessible for a fairly decent amount of time, and then the ones that the ones that are going to buoy as expected because they're commander staples or modern staples, etc., will buoy, and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
You just have to think about, is this a product I want to sit on because I can flip it? Is it a product I want to crack because I can flip it? Or is it a product that I want to buy singles for because I want to play these cards and I don't want to, play the lottery? And all are viable and all speak to the fact that supplemental sets on the whole for the game are generally pretty good. Not in terms of quality, but just for the game and the ecosystem that Magic the Gathering represents. Everything underneath it. So, for me, in regards to supplementals, I think I've said, everything I need to. I like I said, I have my own that I hold for reasons. It sounds like you have your own too, and I think if you have any kind of sealed product storage, you should always look at supplemental sets, no matter what it is, as holds for the long term, and do your due diligence and decide whether or not every supplemental that hits is for you. And it is tiring. We get so many supplemental products.
Awful.
So many. But at the same time, you can just kick out something small like Secret Layers and say, hey, that's not for me. I prefer the draft environments, and go after those. Or, hey, I like the commander stuff, which is what I do, so I get the commander stuff. It's all viable, and it just needs to fall into your plan and what you want to do. And for the foreseeable future, these are the kinds of supplementals that we're going to get. They may phase out one of these for something else. It doesn't matter. But again, the supplementals will hit. They'll be great for the game and the playability as a whole, and they will be a financial vehicle. You just need to figure out if it falls within your plan, your timetable, your churn model.
Picks?
Yeah. All right, I think.
Yeah.
Did you go first last week? Did I go first?
I think you went.
It doesn't matter. My pick's been lurking in the shadows.
All right,
And that's a good pun, so I'm taking my pick. My pick for the week is Lurking Predators, a card from Magic 2010, reprinted twice, once in Jumpstart and once in Commander 2016. It's a card near and dear to my heart because it cheats really big creatures into play. Really big. And you can see over time, the trend line is as such overall that we just see a lot of growth and some retraction. 2016, like I said, we got the Commander reprinted, it dips down, and then eventually picks up over time. This recent spike in 2020, I kind of discount because it retraces immediately, but what we're seeing right now, this gain, starting, in 2021-ish, this is what I'm looking at. This is why I took this card off my list of, backburner cards and moved it up to the front. So this card has been on my list since November, so about 4 months I've been tracking it. At that point, Card Kingdom was buying 16 for $3. TCG Player had 78 copies at a market of $6.46 at LP or better. As of me choosing this, Card Kingdom's buying 19 at $4, so that's an increase in both directions. And Card Kingdom has 61 at $5.06 market, which is a little interesting that there are fewer on the market and the price dropped. But again, I've talked about this with other cards before. To me, that just speaks to people of finally attempting to exit a card that they've been sitting on for a while because it was stagnant. As we saw in the price graphs, and I'll bring it up again, this card was stagnant from, let's say, July 2020 all the way up to January. So that's a 5-6 month period where it just does nothing. And as it starts to gain, people just want to exit out of it to move into something else, reclaim a little bit of that stashed cash. So what does this card do? Like I said, it cheats big fatties into play. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, you may put that card onto the bottom of your library. So essentially, whatever is on top can just hit play or be moved to the bottom to help you sort through and just hit some gas, right? So this is essentially eminently playable in every creature deck in EDH that plays green. But you do want to look at this card when you have both a critical mass of creatures and a critical mass of creatures with large CMCs to take advantage of this free cast. You don't want to be playing it alongside a bunch of little elves or simic creatures because they cost between 1 and 3, whatever, just cast them, right? So within the format itself, over time, this only gets better because creatures overall get better, and that is irrelevant to their overall size or whether or not they have an enter the battlefield effect, trigger, what have you. So similarly to Elvish Piper, Lurking Predators places the creature directly into play, which means you miss out on cast triggers like you get with the Eldrazi. So it's a little bit at odds with decks that want to take advantage of that kind of effect. However, cast triggers being a little bit safer than ETBs, it's still a guaranteed trigger in both directions, both the cast and the ETB, because Lurking Predators actually saves you from counter magic. Once Lurking Predators is on the battlefield, you can't counter that creature. It's going to come in, so you're going to get that ETB trigger, right? And it also saves you an incredibly large amount of mana across a game. It costs 6, but if you're just consistently flipping 5, 6, 7s, 8s, and 9s, you're going to save a ton of mana across that game, and you're going to be able to get to the board a lot faster and a lot larger than other people will. So on its own, highly playable if your average CMC for your creature is rather high and your creature count is rather dense, like I mentioned. Again, this is something I'd expect to see in a big Gruul deck or a big mono green deck, not something that's looking to just play a lot of smaller creatures. And you look at this and you say, okay, I've got to play off the top of my deck. What can I do? Well, you can actually set up this trigger with things like Worldly Tutor, Congregation of Dawn, Huatuo, which is from one of the Portal sets, I believe, and one of the top generals associated with this card, if I could pull it up. Huatuo is a 1/2 for 3, 1 double green. Put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. Activate this ability only during your turn before attackers are declared, but it doesn't say as a sorcery. So if anybody mucks around in your pre-combat main, you can in response put it on top, right? So you can always respond to the Lurking Predators trigger. Even Sensei's Divining Top allows you to set this up.
Yep.
You want to play this in black or green? Well, you can Volrath Stronghold or Haunted Highway, whatever it is, your creature back on top for Lurking Predators. It's a really tricky card, which keeps you from playing a scripted game and allows you to play a more reactive game, which I think is oft overlooked with a card like this. I have a side note about playability. This also makes Riku of the Two Reflections incredibly strong, as Riku only looks to see that the creature enters the battlefield. It doesn't care if it was cast. As long as the creature enters the battlefield, Riku can copy it. So Riku works incredibly well with this. And overall, I understand why basically every commander associated with this card on Rec, and I'll bring this up, is basically a big dumb green-red X creature, because like I said, I'd expect this in mono green or big rule, but I don't understand why this isn't played nearly as much as it is when a lot of people are looking to play big dumb creatures in EDH. So, my timeline on this. So this card did suffer from that Q3, Q4 EDH lull, which I mentioned before, and that essentially it halted demand and thus growth, and we're finally seeing this crest past its all-time high without a sign of retracing. So with the reprint in Commander 2016, we did see a bit of stagnation as supply met demand, but we're so far past that point in time that without another large set printing, this should retain its current market price slope. So again, I expect continued growth. Recently, buy list numbers met the open market floor, and if both continue to rise in tandem like they have been, I would expect that if you were to buy in below $8, you're able to get out in about 6 months. I think that is our minimum. However, with the recent rise in this card overall, and the increase in density of good green creatures, good big creatures that can slot into green-based EDH decks, any kind of content driven or centered around this card, will raise the price of this card faster, and you might be able to churn more effectively. Right now on TCG Player, I think the prices go up towards $10. Like, not quickly, just, over time it stretches. You can get up to $10. And if you filter for 4 or more, you can, almost every copy is below $8. So, like I said, per my projection, as long as you're able to buy in under $8, which you can right now, it is not that difficult, you should still be able to get out in about 6 months at a profit to buy a list.
I like this card because it is literally one of the most green cards that ever greened in EDH, and it's not close. It does everything you want. It cheats big dumb creatures into play. It messes with top deck manipulation. It cheats small creatures into play, whatever you want. It just gives you free card advantage, which is something that green actually has a lot of if you know where to look.
Yes.
And I think that this, being at 6 mana, it's a little cost prohibitive for like the competitive EDH scene.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But I think that, it does one of the most casual, friendly things that you can look for in Magic. So like you said, unless we see a large set reprint, I don't see this trajectory changing. We may stagnate for a little bit again, but we're not going to go down.
No.
And as, more people get more invested in EDH, start building more decks, they're going to need more copies. So I think this is, even if it's something that you get just to throw in a trade binder for when paper events happen again, that's a fine place to put it because someone at the GP is going to need this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The one thing I can't speak to, and it's difficult to source out because it happened so long ago, is, right, this card went from nothing to everything in EDH, and we're talking that jump happened at the beginning of the format where people were discovering what to do, what they wanted to do, and we weren't afforded all these great ramp pieces, all these great and efficient creatures. And what causes this stagnation for like 2 to 3 years in price overall and seemingly demand? It's not like creatures didn't get better, and it's not like we didn't get continuously, increasingly costed creatures over time. But what, kind of blocked this card in that time span, that wasn't just those 2 reprints, like I mentioned, C16 and Jumpstart. It's not like, if you Forest and Soul Ring on turn 1, and then you turn 2, play a land, Kadama's Reach, you can untap on turn 3 and play this card. And that's not out of the question for a regular EDH game. Like, yeah, it takes a lot of cards, but once that happens, you're on 6 mana, you can just be slamming whatever you want off the top of your library. And it's not like that is an ineffective or inefficient line of play.
Yeah.
I get it if you're not playing large creatures, but it seems like as you look through all the supplemental products that are meant to handle EDH and even a lot of the standard sets, and you look at what's on the top end, this card supports all of that, and I don't understand why there was this kind of just drop off in visibility of this card. It was incredibly powerful before, and it only gets more powerful over time. And once people kind of come back and remember that, I think that's where we see it. I just don't know what outshined it, because to see this stagnation, it seems like something had to come into play and really, muscle in for this room. It's like Tooth and Nail. That's an amazing card, and you don't see it as much as you would expect to in EDH.
Yeah.
I think it still has a decent percentage, because it's a one card win combo.
Yeah.
Well, at least you can one shot somebody. You get Xenagod and Blightsteel Colossus or whatever. But yeah, 7k dex, 3% for Tooth and Nail, 2%, 4.7k dex for Lurking Predators. And aside from the print numbers, because Tooth and Nail was original mirrored in Modern Masters, and Lurking Predators was in M10, which is like the New World Order for everything. Like, print numbers aside, I just don't understand why this card is like as stagnant as it is. That seems incorrect. It just seems like people don't remember what this card was and can be.
Yeah, I'm not sure. If anyone watching this remembers, tweet us. Let us know if there's a card that we're missing, please. All right, so I have a bonus pick. So I'm going to give the bonus pick first before my real pick.
Before we talk
the
about
bonus
the low-hanging fruit?
We're going to talk about the low-hanging fruit, but that's not the bonus pick.
Okay.
That's the real one. Well, it's kind of low-hanging fruit. Maybe it's both. So we mentioned this earlier about how, Rudy made the video about From the Vault and how some of those have been saved. I've been watching a lot of the old foils that have From the Vault printings and seeing how the prices correlate, everything else. So I picked this card previously on the cast in like year 1, and it was From the Vault Tanglewire. So the Nemesis Foil has quadrupled over the last few months, from about $50 to $200 low for the foil printing. The From the Vault printing is still sitting pretty at sub $20. In fact, on all of TCG, there are 10 total listings with 16 copies that top out at $25. This is something that, as these old star foils move, you'll start to look for the other unreprintable versions of the foil. This Tanglewire, being From the Vault, is not getting printed again. It's from 20, which, as we mentioned, was one of the a little bit less good ones. So there's probably not a ton out there that are unopened. Your hits in this were like Thran Dynamo, Jace, Dark Rit, which has had better printing since, and Tanglewire.
There's just not a...
Yeah, there's nothing in this one. Oh, Ink Eyes, obviously. Sorry, how could I forget that? But, there's not a whole lot of high-value items in this. So it's not like you're risking someone cracking a bunch of From the Vault 20s to tank the value. But I think it's, an interesting opportunity, because Card Kingdom, prior to us recording this, had one copy for $12, but someone scooped it up. So there's not a whole lot of copies of this out there. It's a good opportunity. That's your free pick. The real pick, and this is a little bit more in-depth discussion, Time Spiral Remastered Dovin's Veto. So I picked this basically to highlight some of the low-hanging fruit that's out there, that for collectors, once supplies of this start to dry up and we get an idea of how narrow the print run is, which I fully expect it to be pretty narrow, cards like this that see constructed play, that see EDH play, that occupy a niche in terms of reprints. This is Plane specific. This had a promo reprint before. We've got a few different versions. This is something that has the opportunity to rise in price very quickly. And it's something that, as my lovely co-host touched on before we went live, there's immediate opportunity here on places like Card Kingdom. So right now, Card Kingdom has X20 available for $4. If you go to TCG and look for quantity of 4 or more, the bare minimum to get a playset from one vendor is $7. So this has been restocked already today. Coalition Relic is another example. These are things that you can get early on that had a price point previously, that have collectability, that similarly to when I picked Divert, the Invocation a while ago. And, my reason was, this is a low-hanging fruit. When people start collecting this is going to be something with a better percentage ceiling than like your Pact of Negations because they started out higher. Dovin's Veto occupies that spot of here is a low-hanging fruit with a much higher ceiling once people start collecting these. So getting in now, getting it as a throw-in in a trade, getting it, just going to a draft if your LGS is having those. And just like, hey, does anybody have any Dovin's Vetoes? I'll swap you straight across for a set or FNM or whatever.
Yep.
Is a good opportunity to get a good long-term return on this. That's for specifically cards like Dovin's Veto, which are on the lower price point end. You're looking at about a 12-month turnaround plus on this. But getting it at $1, I would think in about 12 months, you'll easily see just a random Card Kingdom buy list of $2, $3, no problem. So, and that may be contracted to be a little bit shorter just because if we get an idea that, hey, we're not reprinting this again, you get one run and you're done.
Yep.
Suddenly we're at, that's it. It's dried up. And the price starts to go up a little bit higher.
Yep.
And touching on, what we said in the episode where supplemental sets have that known refractory period where you hit 3 months, you've got your low, and 6 months, you start to see the recovery. On the lower end stuff, it's usually a little bit longer, which is why I have the 12-month run on the Time Spiral remastered version of Dovin's Veto.
Yeah.
Now, the interesting thing is the foils on this card are $40 and Card Kingdom sold out at $60. Nobody has a playset of this. Nope. And I think that this is another opportunity where if you can get some of these Time Spiral remastered cards that are low-hanging fruit on the foils, that are your $30 to $40 foils, you've got a really good opportunity to turn it around in about 6 to 12 months. So I just wanted to point that out as something that, Dovin's Veto highlights the nature of the pick for me, basically. That this is something that is a very low-hanging fruit, that has a very good room for growth, that just occupies a perfect spot on set release weekend for you to say, you know what, I'm going to scoop up a few of these from a vendor like Card Kingdom, or I'm going to scoop up a few of these from multiple vendors on TCG and just see where it goes.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's rough.
When we talked about this, I think like midweek when we were ruminating, and you told me you wanted Dovin's Veto, and I asked, do you want foil or do you want regular? We hemmed and hawed about which one would be the better pick overall in the long run because we really didn't know the price trajectory of the foils. I wasn't sure exactly what you're going to touch on, and a lot of everything you talked about is exactly what we talked about in the pod Discord on Friday when we noticed that CK was underserving the price of a lot of cards within the main set. And TCG Player was underserving a lot of the cards in the time shifted sheet or whatever it is. Whatever it's called, right? And how the price on a lot of the time shifted cards on TCG Player didn't make sense and still don't. You have gluts around certain numbers, and it doesn't quite make sense as to why a lot of these cards are bucketed where they are, and there exists a lot of opportunity for the purchase of non-foil cards out of some of these buckets to be very lucrative later on down the line. So on Friday, a lot of us went to Card Kingdom and bought our stuff from the regular set, and then TCG Player to buy our old border cards. And I didn't pick up a lot from the old border stuff. I picked up stuff that was Storm related because that's the old border stuff I want. But there still exist cards, like you said, Dovin's Veto. I think Dreadhorde Arcanist is in a good spot to pick up. I think Dismember and Path might be a little underserved in terms of price, especially because Dismember is essentially a colorless card and Path is EDH playable. And Panharmonicon is like $10, $11 for the old frame, which, I don't know if that price is correct long term. And generally speaking, Panharmonicon has always held a very reliable EDH forward price, but that still seems low to me. And it's always worth the investigation for cards like this. And it's not just like, oh, this card seems underpriced, let me buy it. It's like, okay, this card seems underpriced. I need to cross-reference this with what's going on. The reason I bought the cards that I did from Card Kingdom was because as I was checking prices there, I was also checking playability data from EDH Rec and cost of the primary set and any supplemental printings of those cards. And anywhere I saw a delta of 2x or more, I bought from Card Kingdom.
Yeah.
Because I thought that was underserved. And similarly, it went the other way when I was looking at the old border stuff. The price on Card Kingdom, if that was 2x for Past in Flames, then there was an easy scoop from a specific vendor on TCG Player. Similarly, I picked up cranial plating and what was my non-EDH card? Repeal.
Oh, yeah.
Because that card, I have everything lined up for Legacy and Vintage Storm, and Repeal is the card that floats through, right? And then Crystal Shard, because that's a card I wanted to have a bunch of copies of for EDH, and the delta between original printing and old border was enough for me to just move in, and the delta between Card Kingdom and TCG Player also reaffirmed that decision. And Card Kingdom has almost repriced everything by now, by the time this cast goes live, but TCG Player is still constantly reloading, and while the prices are shifting up to expected price points for things like Pact Negation, which is main set, a lot of the old border stuff really has not shifted that far because people are kind of like locked in and honed in on these prices because there are large vendors anchoring these numbers like we've talked about before. And I think this is your weekend of opportunity, and that might extend for the next week, but I don't think it's going to last that much longer if what we're hearing about the set is correct. And if the if the initial product load on Amazon that we saw was actually incorrect, and they actually over allocated themselves, which means the number they were displaying and what they were hiding was not what they got, then we can, and there is only one print run of this, then we can expect everything to float up. And I think action on these cards is going to happen sooner rather than later. And it is time you start looking at the low-hanging fruit if you want playables and if you want items that are financial vehicles.
Yep.
So, all this was basically behind the scenes going on when you and I were talking about this during the week. And like I said, to me, it all just kind of hit really obviously when I was looking at this. It was like, oh, this makes a lot more sense now that I can see these numbers. And it's no longer just this, theory. I can put it into practice. And it makes...
Exactly.
Once I can see it and visualize it and understand my data points, it makes a lot more sense to me. And I hope... now a lot of this makes sense to people who are listening because you can see these numbers in front of you. You'll see them change over the next couple of days, and you can say, okay, hey, this is shifting, this isn't, I need to move in here, or I need to change what I'm doing, get out of this and move into this.
Yep.
So I think it's a good call overall, and I expect we'll see and report back on these for a while to come, because they'll be interesting.
Definitely. I think these are effectively, especially the foils, the new masterpiece. And that's what we're looking at in terms of price.
Yeah.
So, you'll have some duds, obviously, but you'll have a lot of hits.
Oh, absolutely.
And even the duds will be worth money.
Exactly, because it's old border, and you're not going to get another old border reprinting until they do either Time Spiral remastered, or if they do more remastered sets and this becomes the norm. We're not really sure in any direction because, like we mentioned before, this is the first remastered set they've officially done in paper. And of all the actual paper sets they've done after the border change away from this old one, they've never gone to old border outside of Time Spiral set itself. They have never redone those old borders in a primary set. So it's kind of TBD on this. But before we head out, the last thing I want to mention is this week we got a little more insight into the timelines of what's coming up this year and the structure of products overall. And something that we've been talking about, especially in regards to picks, is Innistrad Vampires and Innistrad Werewolves. When we displayed the product list last summer, when WotC reported on it, Werewolves and Vampires straddled the timeline, one on top, one on bottom, but almost directly above one another. This past week, we actually got the set timelines for the rest of the year. And we've linked that on Twitter, and it's in the Discord channel. There is a month difference between the release of the sets, where Werewolves comes first, Vampires comes second. What we do not know is whether or not Vampires is going to actually be a standard legal set, or is just going to be a supplemental vampire-based product. We do not know that yet. So, talking about supplementals this week, and then moving forward, that doesn't really come up in conversation because it is still up in the air. I do not believe that Maro or anybody else has really come forward and said, hey, this is a supplemental set, or this is an extension off a primary. Or, hey, this will be standard legal, but it's going to be LCG style, where you can buy a living card game, where you buy a product that's got everything. We know really nothing about this product on the whole. We just got a descriptor, which basically says, hey, it's a vampire wedding. And that's about it. So we
Team Edward, Team Jacob.
Yeah, well, I mean, for the vampire product as a whole, it's just like, well, what do? We we have expectations. It's a vampire wedding, so we might not see Blade of the Blood Chief, like we mentioned before. We might not see Vampire Nocturnus. We might not see this or that. We'll probably see Edgar Markov show up if it's a vampire wedding. Maybe not Lord, like the Commander printing, and we might not see Soren Markov show up like we've known Soren before. We might see a new Soren. We might not. There's a lot we don't know around this product, and it's something we're definitely going to keep an eye on because it could represent an interesting space in the timeline as a whole. A lot of people expect it to just be a Q4 sale just to help increase numbers overall, but that still doesn't speak to whether it's main set, supplemental, or something we have yet to see. But that's where that product lies, and it just kind of came at us really quick at the end of the week, and thus because we were short on information, we didn't want to really bring it up during the main cast. So we'll be sure to report back as we know, because it will affect everything we talk about once we know. But that aside, I think we're good for this week, right?
I'm Gucci.
Perfect. So, we are at MtG Cabalcast on Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, YouTube, not SoundCloud, but Stitcher, Audible.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I missed Audible last week. Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. I feel like I'm still missing one. But outside of that, you can reach us anywhere there. You can find the podcast almost everywhere there. We're always taking questions wherever. We got a lot of questions this week in our Discord about supplemental products and Time Spiral as a whole. And it was a blast talking with people about this product and kind of swung the direction of the cast this week. So if there's anything you want to ask, hit us up there. We're always quick to respond. We try and get to all our YouTube comments, so we're a little slower there. But other than that,
sorry.
We're free to talk, chat whenever. You can find me directly at Halt I Am Reptar on Twitter. They can find you
at Thirsty Sizzler.
And we'll see you next week.